I created this graphic because I just thought it'd be an interesting way to show what the emergence looks like for these things. And so we have these civilizational steering crises that we've talked about as part of the meta crisis, these 5. And if we look at this as a timeline on the lower or in the bottom here, the pain of reorganization is much higher than the pain of not solving. And this, you give humans enough pain, they get motivated. You know, we get pretty focused when we're under enough pain. And what happens over time, of course, is that the pain of not solving something, if it's a genuinely structural problem, is that it grows over time. And so at some point, the pain of not solving starts to exceed the pain that's required to reorganize systems. And the pain of not solving is directly related to the worldview limitations here. So the worldview limitations of your current worldviews are driving the pain that's being encountered. And of course, the entire world's built on prior philosophy. And then, of course, there was at one point new prior philosophy. And then what happens is the first thing to emerge when you have these steering crises is new philosophy begins to emerge. Humanity tends to innovate from the philosophers downwards, which is pretty cool. And so the worldview limitations start to drive the motivation where new philosophy starts to emerge. And as it does, then a new worldview begins to emerge. And that new worldview begins to create a little bit of cognitive surplus. And cognitive surplus here can be just understood as a way of seeing the problem that makes it tractable that the prior worldviews couldn't make it. So all of a sudden, the cognitive surplus is making the existing problems tractable, but the cognitive surplus is still too small relative to the steering crises. And then in the emergence, as that cognitive surplus grows, and it eventually outstrips the size of the steering crisis, you start to see a new civilizational operating system come online with new sense making, new identities, new stories, new structures, and new institutions. We can also, interestingly, say that same chart, you can also look at it through, if you're familiar with the adaptive cycle that I used in The Great Release, you can also look at it through a complex adaptive systems lens and say, okay, you've got this growth part of the cycle. You then go into a stagnation or exploitation part of the cycle, and then you go into a breakdown or release. And it tends to be when things are starting to get really ugly, where you get breakdown, and then what happens is you get emergent reorganization and then growth again into a new cycle. Now, where we are, I would guess, is about right here. And what I'm arguing for is we need to be preparing for right here. We are here. The work to do is to prepare for this reorganization.